Good morning, everyone. Today, I will be discussing classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov. Learning objectives. After completion of this lesson, the students will be able to first, define conditioning. Second, review the concept of classical conditioning. And third, use the acquired knowledge in their daily life. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov, born in 1849 and died on 1936. He was a Russian physiologist who discovered classical conditioning through his experiment with dogs. He was studying the digestive systems of dogs when he noticed an interesting behavioral phenomenon. Classical conditioning explains human development based on the pairing of two stimuli which lead to a learned behavior or response. So basically, classical conditioning involves forming an association between two stimuli resulting in a learned response. So as we delve deeper, you will understand classical conditioning and its relevance to your daily life. So first, let us define stimulus and response. So stimulus is anything in the environment that can be detected by our senses: hearing, sight, smell, taste, and touch. And response is a reaction or behavior that occurs in response to stimulus. For example, the teacher asking a question and the students raising their hands to answer. So the stimulus here is the teacher asking a question and the response is the student raising their hands to answer. So now, let's move on to the parts of the classical conditioning. So first, unconditioned stimulus is a stimulus that naturally and automatically triggers a response. So for example, when you smell one of your favorite foods, you may immediately feel very hungry. So in this example, the smell of the food is the unconditioned stimulus. So next, unconditioned response is the automatic reaction to the unconditioned stimulus. So in our example, the feeling of hunger in response to the smell of food is the unconditioned response. So next, neutral stimulus, a stimulus that produces no response other than catching your attention. So, for example, the sound of a specific classroom door opening. So, the sound doesn't initially elicit a specific response from the students, but it could become associated with something else like a particular teacher or subject and then trigger a reaction like excitement or anxiety. So next, conditioned stimulus, a previously neutral stimulus that becomes associated with the unconditioned stimulus. And lastly, conditioned response, the learned response to the conditioned stimulus. So, for example, the teacher asking, "Does anyone have any questions?" Then the students becoming anxious or hesitant to ask questions. So, the conditioned stimulus here is the teacher asking questions, and the conditioned response is the students becoming anxious or hesitant. It is because if the teacher has a history of responding negatively to questions or making students feel uncomfortable when they ask, this praise might trigger anxiety in students, making them less likely to participate even if they have genuine questions. So here is the example of classical conditioning. Imagine a student who always anticipates a task when their teacher walks into class holding a specific type of folder. This anticipation is not just about the upcoming lesson, but stems from a conditioned response. The teacher, known for using that folder to carry tests, has created an association with the students. Over time, the sight of the folder becomes a conditioned stimulus, triggering the conditioned response of anxiety in the students even before the teacher actually announces a test. So the unconditioned stimulus is the task paper and the unconditioned response is the anxiety, worry, or a sense of dread of the students. Then the neutral stimulus is the specific folder used to carry test. And then the conditioned stimulus is the specific folder and the conditioned response is the anxiety, worry, or a sense of dread. So this is a classic example of classical conditioning where a neutral stimulus or the folder becomes associated when an unconditioned stimulus or the test paper, leading to a conditioned response or the anxiety. So now let's proceed to Pavlov experiments with dog. So before conditioning, Pavlov started by observing the dogs naturally salivate when they see or smell food. So the unconditioned stimulus here is the food because it naturally triggers the dog to salivate. Then the unconditioned response is the salivation, which is the natural response to the food. Then next, Pavlov introduced a neutral stimulus, which is the bell that initially did not cause salivation in the dogs. So the neutral stimulus here is the bell with no response. Then, during conditioning, Pavlov repeatedly paired the neutral stimulus or the bell with the unconditioned stimulus or the food. The dogs would hear the bell, then immediately receive food. And lastly, after several pairings, the dogs began to salivate at the sound of the bell alone, even without the presence of food. So, after conditioning, the conditioned stimulus here is the bell, which is previously neutral but now triggers salivation of the dog. Then the conditioned response is the salivation, which is the learned response to the bell. So, diri sa after conditioning, kay ga-expect na ang dog nga if naay bell kay naanay food. So, Pavlov experiments show that learning can occur through association. The dogs learn to associate the bell or the neutral stimulus with food or the unconditioned stimulus, triggering a learned response or the conditioned response to salivation. So, classical conditioning simply means is all about learning to expect something based on our previous experiences. And that concludes my report. And now I leave you with this quote by Ivan Pavlov: "Never think that you already know all. However highly you are appraised, always have the courage to say to yourself, I am ignorant."